Looking for the music.
And we'll go with the music.
Good evening and welcome to the 14th season and 577th episode of Travelwitch Radio. I'm Dan Schlossberg along with my friend and producer Roger Noriega. And we're in the 14th season of Travelwitch Radio, the show that lets you enjoy the pleasures of travel from the comfort of your armchair.
Every week at this time, we talk to people representing destinations, hotels, airlines, railroads, car rental companies, and others in the world of travel and hospitality, from authors and bloggers to broadcasters and publicists. If it's got anything to do with travel, it's got everything to do with Travelwitch Radio.
And our guest today is Nick Wayland, founder and president of Trav Media. Welcome, Nick, to Travelwitch Radio.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Roger. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very humbled that you've thought about me, and I am honored for the privilege of talking to everybody today.
Well, Nick, at Travelwitch Radio, we try to bring our guests, our viewers, different aspects of the travel experience, including reading about it. And that's why we wanted to let people know about Trav Media and about your views on travel in general. Please tell our audience what Trav Media is and what it does.
Yeah, so look, a brief, quick 30-second history. I used to be the travel editor of the Courier newspaper group in Australia, as you can tell from my Australian accent. And the thing about being in Sydney, Australia, is that we had to travel for about 2 to 3 weeks to the Northern Hemisphere because otherwise it just wasn't worth our while. I mean, as it is today, it still takes me at least a week to get over jet lag. So just imagine that. So I would go away 2 to 3 weeks a year and I would run out of stories. And when the internet came along, the light bulb went off and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if we could get all of the information that we needed from one resource? Now, Google was just literally in its infancy. Facebook wasn't around. LinkedIn wasn't around there. We're 25 years old. So I started to publish press releases on the web, and all of my journalist friends who I've known for years, traveling with them, of course, they'd become my extended family. They started to log on and get all of their information. Back then, mind you, it was dial-up and not cable like we know it today. It was not fast. It was not seamless. But over the years, we've grown to expand, and we're now we've got offices in 9 countries. We service 32 countries. We have 3,832 clients, and they're made up of tourism boards, airlines, cruise lines, destinations, you name it, everybody in the industry. We're very much a B2B. So in a nutshell, we're the LinkedIn of the travel industry for travel writers. I hope that explains it.
Well, what did you do before founding Trav Media?
Well, yeah, as I said earlier, I used to be the travel editor of Courier newspapers. I also had a car column and a ski column. I kind of had the best portfolios of the newspapers. And as much as many people believed my family owned the newspaper, they didn't. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and with the right excitement and the right knowledge and know-how. So I had the great honor of having this travel and motoring section for 10 years before I started Trav Media. And that was my springboard because, I knew enough about the industry. I knew enough about technology, and I was young enough to embrace the internet before it became what it is today.
When I was studying journalism at Syracuse University at the Newhouse School, I never knew there was something called a travel writer. Did you ever have the same experience?
Well, you see, a travel writer was an essential tool back then for learning about a destination. So the travel writer has actually been around for probably 50 years before I came on the side. Came in the industry. My career started in 1990 1992. And I remember looking back through the newspapers and old travel sections. They went back all the way to the Second World War. So yeah, I did know there was one, but it is, as I mentioned earlier, that the two or three best portfolios in a newspaper would have to include travel. I mean, who doesn't like to travel?
I know there are hundreds, if not thousands, of travel journalists, especially in North America, but with print publications cutting pages because of declining ad revenue, do the exposure to the internet compensate?
Look, that's a really good question. I often get asked, is print dead? And the answer, quite simply, is it's being diminished because you can get your news from online immediately. Like, what's going on at the moment in Los Angeles with all the fires, and as terrible as it may be, we're able to watch real time live streaming television, not just on your television, but also on the internet. So, yes, the day and the age of print producing stories the day after for news, certainly, those days are gone. But I still like to go to that coffee table magazine, smell it, flick through it. I love the idea of a glossy mag. And I certainly like reading a magazine when I'm flying on planes. So is print dead? No, print is not dead. Is the newspaper and magazine no longer going to survive? Certainly not. They're going to be online instead. They're just changing. It's just a revolution of life. One day we were told that radios were going to replace newspapers, and then when television came out, they were going to replace both newspapers and radio. And then when the internet came out, it's going to be like, we're going to replace them all. But it's not the case. It's not true. There's still radio, as we're talking on radio today. There's still television, there are still newspapers, and there'll still be the internet.
Do you have a rough idea how many travel journalists there are in North America?
Yeah, another brilliant question. I would say pre-pandemic, there was about 8,000 travel writers in North America. And unfortunately, just because there have been much reduced print sections of newspapers, and because they can syndicate their stories in so many newspapers, and so many newspapers and publications have now merged, that there are about 5,000 travel writers in the industry, which is still a lot. I mean, imagine 5,000 travel stories being produced every week. That's a lot of content. That's a lot of traveling. It's a lot of stories. But when you think about it, the travel industry is the biggest industry in the world. On every corner of every street, in every suburb, there is usually either a restaurant, we can talk about that later, or there's a pub, or there's a backpacker, or there's some sort of hostel or hotel for that matter. So the travel industry is enormous. It employs more people than any other industry in the world.
As someone who has written for newspapers and magazines, I know one of the big controversies in the field is editors refusing stories from freelancers who accept sponsored or hosted trips. But isn't the main issue fairness? When a writer accepts a trip, doesn't he need to report the bad as well as the good?
Yeah, look, Dan, you really hit something that's very close to my heart. And I will say that there are 4 publications only that don't take hosted trips, and they would be CNN, BBC, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, actually probably 5, and that is the the Wall Street Journal. USA Today used to have that policy, and they changed it for the exact reason that you just mentioned it. How can you do a first-person experience and trust the journalist's ability to report on a destination unless you've been hosted or unless you've gone and visited? Now, on the other argument, of course, is that these Wall Street journals, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, they're all about like editorial integrity. And I don't blame them for, having this policy, truth in travel. But yes, you do need to go and experience these destinations. You do need to have these first person experiences. And unfortunately, if you were to go to Antarctica, that's going to cost you $15,000. And I can promise you, there is no publication in the world that's going to compensate you for that $15,000 trip. So there has to be a little bit of give and take here. And it's a debate that we're having right now. And certain people are in one side, certain people on the other. Hopefully there's some middle ground, but they've both got very good arguments for why you should or shouldn't be able to take sponsored or hosted trips.
We're talking with Trav Media founder and travel expert Nick Wayland.
Nick, I want to ask, what is your own travel schedule like? Do you travel mostly for business or also for pleasure? And please share with our viewers some of your favorite places.
Yeah, Roger, I would say that, my favorite place to take a holiday is at home because I'm on the road 9 months of the year.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
we have offices in Sydney, Hong Kong, Singapore, Berlin, France, in Paris, London, New York, Florida, Los Angeles. Buenos Aires. So I've got to get around to all of these offices to meet the staff on a regular basis. And we also have an event that we do in all of these countries that Dan's coming along to in a few weeks. And it's not for the consumer. I want to be very clear. We have this thing called Trav Media's International Media Marketplace. It's basically, for lack of a better description, speed dating for journalists. We put the journalists together with the destinations. And we do this in all these countries. We do it in France, we do it in the UK, we do it in Australia, we do it here in the US. And we've got 1,100 destinations and travel writers coming to meet in a few weeks' time. And they basically sit down and negotiate a year's worth of stories at these events. So to answer your question, I've got to be at these events. I need to MC them. I'm always traveling. Your second question is, what are my favorite destinations? Well, my wife is a very keen skier. So we tend to go skiing, but unfortunately, it's a bit of a sad story. I went skiing this year straight after Christmas and I got altitude sickness and I ended up in hospital. I'm now back down in Florida because the doctors in the hospital said you really need to get down to a safe, well, basically the sea level. So unfortunately, I'm here at home, and my lovely wife is skiing in Vail. But we love skiing. We also love Greece in summer, or the south of France in summer. There are so many wonderful destinations to go to. I mean, Egypt just has such great history. You go there and you read the scrolls, which have been written over 2,000 years, and the language at the beginning is different from the language at the end. I mean, it's just such a fascinating part of the world. If it's safe, though, I won't say it is at the moment. If it's safe, definitely put that on your bucket list. And then one of the things that I think we should all do is get down to Antarctica. It's one of the wildernesses that we can only explore for about 3 months of the year, but it's just absolutely fascinating down there, practically untouched by humans. Very wild, and it's on my bucket list to do. I went to Patagonia last year, which was wonderful to see the glaciers. What other fantastic destinations? Look, there's no summer holiday like a Mediterranean holiday. Summer in Europe is tops. You just can't beat it. So I don't know. I'm in travel. I like to travel. I like to see many destinations. There's lots of destinations I haven't had the chance to see, but they're all destinations have something of value. Otherwise, we wouldn't travel.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you about another place a little bit later. It's in the Siberian part of the world, so I think you'll know what I'll ask you about in a bit. I can't go right now, as a lot of other people. But anyway, I hope your condition is just temporary right now, Nick. I hope you heal and you're able to get back because, oh, man. I really do. I hope you get better real soon. In your opinion, what American newspapers have the best travel sections? I know many of them run on Sundays, and I still read the Sunday newspaper, or at least they used to.
Look, I've just looked at the survey of the top 100 read stories on the internet. And of course, you're going to have natural disasters up there. You're going to have, obviously, what's been going on in politics. Did you know that the 12th most read story on the internet last year was a story from CNN Travel about this poor guy who bought a cruise ship, spent $1 million renovating it, only to find that the bottom of the boat had rusted through and he couldn't move it. It was, one of those stories of, complete adversity where he followed his passion through his heart, not his mind. And it was the 12th most popular story. And look, that sort of says that we like to dream, we like to admire travel destinations, we like to live vicariously through other people. So my top publications, and these are literally going on readership, would be BBC, CNN, Washington Post, National Geographic, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and the Toronto Star. Now, sure, there are a couple of publications I would have missed out. I could be here all day, but they're usually your top publications.
I thank you for that. And I do want to welcome Patty Figueroa, who's loving the conversation. She's watching it live. Thank you for joining us, Patty, on Facebook. I want to remind the audience, if you have any questions, I know we didn't tell Nick this, but we do have a live audience. Maybe if you want to run a question or a comment, please let us know and we'll get to it. So speaking of what we're doing, since we're on a live podcast, and I abhor that line, I say we do live internet, but no one understands what that is. So we do a live podcast that has become a video cast. Another word. Is this the wave of the future in travel journalism? Because we keep hearing more and more about podcasting.
Look, podcasting is exploding, and it's easy to see why. Rather than tune into a radio station where you're listening to some opinion from a shock jock, you can go onto podcasts. It's just become so easy for you to put them on in your car as you're driving to the airport. That's what I would probably do. Taking the kids to school, taking the kids home, picking up your husband or wife or wherever it might happen to be. It's just so easy. Or for that matter, listening to it in bed. So, yeah, podcasts have exploded. It's understandable why, because technology has become so easy for us to be able to do that. I'm a little surprised because I'm very much a visual guy, but when you listen to the research that's gone into these podcasts and you listen to these people who are experts in their field, you are just trapped. And I just think podcasts are going to continue to be incredibly popular.
It's good to know. Speaking of broadcasting in general, the late Anthony Bourdain set new standards for travel journalism with his video series. Has culinary writing superseded straight travel writing?
Oh, I don't know about that. So here's the thing. Travel and food go hand in hand. What is the one thing you want to do when you travel is experience the culture, right? So food is definitely up there. Number one in a survey of why people travel or what they like to do the most is, would you believe it, shopping. But the number two is food. So yes, I have a love for culinary experiences. If you're down in Argentina, there's nothing like the wine and the beef. If you're in Asia, there's nothing like the dumplings. If you're in Australia, there's nothing like the lamb and the seafood. So yeah, culinary experience is definitely a hot topic. Will it supersede the experiences of first-person trips, to Antarctica or skiing? No, probably not. But it certainly has a massive influence in the decision-making of the traveler.
Excellent. That's good to know. Many travel journalists have other careers. Teaching, for example, that helps pay their bills. Dan, right here with us to my right, covers baseball. How hard is it for any travel writer to support themselves only with their work in travel journalism?
I'll make no mistake, there is no career in being a travel journalist. It is probably the poorest paid career that you could choose, and I really don't recommend it. But having been in this industry now for 35 years, but it is a lifestyle choice. Mm-hmm. And there are some benefits. Don't get me wrong. I miss my travel writing days like nothing before. It's because you get to go behind the scenes. It's because you get to experience things that other people wouldn't otherwise experience, whether that's going into the bowels of a ship to look at the engines or or going with the snow plows doing a ski run. You just don't get to experience what a travel writer does as a regular travel punter. So there are lots of upsides, but it's certainly not a career that's going to put food on the table. And if for that reason and that reason alone, people have had to go and get second or third jobs. So yeah, it's a great fun lifestyle, but it doesn't make much money.
Understood. Appreciate that. This is Travel Edge Radio with Dan Schlossberg and Roger Noriega. We're in our 14th season and approaching our 600th episode. We're live at 5 New York time every Thursday on LinkedIn, YouTube, WhatsApp, X, Twitter, and Facebook, among others. And of course, 2 p.m. Pacific time. That's me out here. We are talking with Nick Whalen, founder of Trav Media.
Nick, I love cruising and have even created, coordinated, and hosted more than 24 baseball-themed cruises. Is cruising, and especially interest in specialty-themed cruises, growing as a travel option?
Oh, well, 100%. I'll go back to Antarctica. Yes, you can fly, but it's usually for the scientists. The majority of people go by cruising. But here's the thing about cruising. You'd only have to pack one suitcase and unpack one suitcase. If you're traveling to a destination like, let's just say, the Mediterranean, where you have several ports of call, you don't want to have to check into a hotel, check out of a hotel, pack your bags, go to the airport, unpack your bags when you get to the next destination. Cruising solves that problem. And then let's also think about it. The population is getting older. We would prefer to just turn up at our destinations rather than having to worry about the schlepping of bags backwards and forwards. So yeah, cruising is as popular as ever. Of course, during COVID, cruising ceased to exist because it was impossible to have so many people on a cruise ship without getting infected with one disease or another. But cruising is definitely a way to see the world, particularly in third world countries, because they just don't have the infrastructure and the hotels to be able to accommodate people like you can on a cruise ship. So although I haven't done nearly enough cruising in my life, I would like to, because it's a way of sitting back, relaxing, and enjoying the ride. But yeah, cruising is definitely huge.
Nick, how did the COVID outbreak of 2020 affect travel in general and travel journalism in particular?
Yeah, well, we all know that we all decided to travel locally. Flights got closed down in most countries. I remember my wife, who's Swedish but has an American green card, she was traveling between Sweden and the US, and she arrived at 6 o'clock at night, and she said to the TSA guy, "Hey, there's not much of a queue today." And he said, "You know what? It's 6 p.m. and you're the first flight from Europe." So international flights, as we know it, literally closed down. Domestic kept going. The drive market exploded because going local was the trend. You could get in your car, you could travel to places. But what's happened now is what I call the rubber band effect. We've been kept in our houses, at our homes, particularly in countries like Australia, where I'm from. And then once we got let out, everybody wanted to travel. Now, that was been happening over the last, I say, 2 years, and it's starting to lose its momentum, and people are becoming a lot more conscious about the economy and certainly with interest rates going up, it's affecting the travel industry because it's the first thing to go. But to answer your question, COVID had a massive effect. And in terms of travel journalism, well, the travel sections pretty much ceased to exist. Newspapers and magazines stopped printing. But the good news is there were a few that closed down, but the ones that were fit, they're the ones that survived, and they're back bigger and better than ever.
With the world an increasingly unsafe place, what advice would you give an American traveler headed overseas?
Well, Dan, I have to say, from an international perspective, the US is looked at as an unsafe place. You've got gun laws here that we don't have in other countries. So you don't have gun laws here that we do have in other countries. And so of course, preferred safe destination would be New Zealand, number one. You know, their crime rate is way down. Australia probably as well. But what's really worrying me and concerning me is the rhetoric that's happening between China and Taiwan, and of course Ukraine. And certainly what's going on in the last 24 hours about Trump threatening military action if Canada and the Panama Canal don't give in. So, you know, we're right in the hot seat here at the moment. And, you know, the best probably destinations to travel to would be, you know, the South Pacific Islands of Australia and New Zealand. And I know as an Australian that they're pretty damn safe.
Nick, why do people love to travel? Is it wanderlust in our DNA?
Well, look, if you get down to the deep roots, the world would not have been explored if we didn't like to travel. You know, we are, as animals, we like to migrate. We don't like the cold. We prefer the warm. It's okay with modern heating, but we are natural in our DNA. We are naturally born to explore. And, you know, the word cabin fever came from people who were stuck in their cabins and couldn't get out. And we don't like that. It's just, we like to explore. We like the visual sensationalism. We like the dopamine release and the euphoria when we go to a new destination and we get to explore and meet people. We are natural explorers. We are natural travelers because we like to be entertained, and our mind is programmed to be able to find as much information as possible, or to learn, basically. And travel is all about learning, isn't it?
Well, what about the cost of travel, though? Since the price of everything else seems to be rising, how about travel? And will that rising cost reduce the volume of travel, especially luxury travel to high-end places and properties?
Okay, so it's a couple of things you've raised there. Let's start with travel and airfares. Did you know that the airfare from Sydney to London or London to Sydney is less today in terms of dollars than it was in 1983? That's pretty amazing that you can get an airfare for about $1,300 from New York to Sydney, and it would have been a lot more than that in the 1980s. So the price of travel has come significantly down. Most people can afford to travel, whereas back in those days, it would take you months to be able to save up. The other thing is that airlines, and more importantly, airplanes, are becoming extremely economic compared to what airplanes we used to have. I mean, we're talking about like 40% cheaper. Now, the reason for this is because we've got this new carbon fiber that we're making our planes out of, and the engines are becoming extremely economical. Most airlines make their money out of frequent flyer programs. They don't make their money out of necessarily traveling passengers from A to B. So yes, the price of traveling has come down considerably. And then we've got other game changers and disruptors like Airbnb that has brought the price down of hotels. Now, yes, there's a lot of pushback at the moment locally about Airbnbs taking over the rental market and making it unaffordable for the local community, but it's here to stay. There's no question about it. So I think that travel is only going to become cheaper in years to come. And in terms of luxury, well, it's the old thing that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. That 1% that owns like 32% of the country, they're going to be able to afford to travel. They're going to be able to afford to pay the prices that these travel companies want. And let's be frank here. The money is not in an Airbnb or a hotel or an airline ticket that's being given away at the last minute. The money's in the luxury market. The money is where that 1% doesn't care how much they spend. All they care about is the experience.
Nick, how can we travel and still be environmentally responsible citizens? We hear a lot about sustainability, but how can we practice what we preach?
Yeah, that's a subject that's very dear to my heart. Okay, So, first of all, you don't have to get in a plane to travel. There is a very good train network in Europe, and for that matter, here in the US. Trains are probably the most economic way to travel. You've, of course, got electric vehicles now. Now, let's not get into the argument about the fact that they've got to burn coal to get the electricity, but there are solar powers, there are wind turbines, there's nuclear energy, there are environmental ways we can travel without affecting the environment. I mean, literally, if you want travel, you can get on a bike. You can travel through to your national park. You can go camping, and you can come back, and you can pretty much have zero effect on the environment.
We're talking with Trav Media founder and travel expert Nick Wayland.
I wanted to go off topic real quick and ask, have you had a chance to go to Siberia, and specifically the Trans-Siberian Railroad? That was actually, it still is on my bucket list, but for obvious reasons, I cannot go right now.
Right. Well, look, if I had crystal ball and thought where I would possibly could go and want to go, Siberia would be certainly up there. I might add in summer. But I'm used to watching these movies that say like Siberian is the coldest part of the world. It's the armpit. It's the armpit of the world. It's where the, forgive me, the Russians send their convicts because they nobody else wants to go there. But look, I could be wrong. I've never been there, and would I like to go? Yeah, sure, bring it on.
Okay, just curious. I appreciate that. Do you find there's more interest in returning to travel destinations people enjoyed in the past, or seeking new ones, especially, as you may have mentioned, in remote parts of the world that are relatively unexplored?
Look, personally, my opinion is I always like to be reassured that I'm going to have the same experience. I'm a creature that likes to go to the same restaurant because I know what I'm going to get. I do like surprises, but I also don't like disappointments. So there's one side of me that's like that. But I went to Patagonia last year, and it's not something I would have thought of, but it was just stunning. And if you're being led by somebody who knows where they're going and knows what they're doing, then absolutely, sure. Love to go and experience something new. But I'm a bit shy, I'm a bit nervous, and I'm not much of a risk taker. And so I'm a creature of comfort. I would prefer to go back to the destinations that I know what I'm going to get.
That's fair, Nick. I appreciate it. I've been on a cruise and I want to go again. I've been on 3 now and I love it. I want to go back. So I get that and I appreciate that. What travel trends do you anticipate in 2025 and beyond, Nick?
Yeah. Okay. So the latest trending is the Taylor Swift effect. You know, we have our children that are wanting to go to something like her concert. We're finding that she's booked out at the local stadium, but she's also got a concert on in, dare I say, Los Angeles or in Spain or in somewhere else in Europe. So people are taking their families to events like the Grand Prix in Las Vegas or the Super Bowl, or I know they're pretty expensive things to go to, but sports and events seem to be the new trend. So I would say that's certainly important. The other ones are the business travelers that are going to their conferences and taking their families with them and then staying on afterwards. In terms of what else is trending, Tokyo, Japan. And the reason is very simple, is that it's become so affordable. Tokyo or Japan have not had much inflation in 20 years like the rest of us. And their dollar is so much cheaper than most foreign currencies. So Sri Lanka is another great destination that seems to be exploding. Certainly Indonesia is very popular. And now with the Australian dollar diving over the last couple of days, I would say certainly the South Pacific Australia is going to be very popular.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Going back a little bit, we talked about this briefly, but as far as travel journalism goes, is it as big in Europe, Australia, and beyond as it is in the United States?
Oh, I have to think about that. I would say bigger,
Oh,
bigger per head. So think about this. For an Australian or New Zealander to travel outside of Australia and New Zealand, they've got to get on a 24-hour flight. And when they go on a 24-hour flight, they stay and they spend more and they stay longer. Because you've got to get over jet lag. You're not going to go for a weekend to New York from Australia. So the journalist, the journalist that shapes public opinion on where to go is incredibly important. So on a per head or per capita basis, there are more travel writers in Australia and New Zealand probably than there are anywhere in the world. In Europe, I would say that the same is also the case. The British, the English very much rely on their newspapers for public opinion, and they have the freedom in Europe to form opinion. Now, that's not to say that US newspapers, publications, journalists don't have a place. Of course they do. There are more travel journalists in North America than probably anywhere in the world, but also there's a bigger population. So what's North America is 1 billion people. So Europe's 1 billion people. And that's several countries, not one country or 3 countries, Mexico, US and Canada. But yeah, so it really horses for courses. It really depends.
excellent. Thousands of international journalists attend an annual conference called IPW, set for Chicago in June. Many of those journalists travel or belong to travel groups or associations such as NATJA, which is the North American Travel Journalists Association, which Dan co-founded in 1991, or SATW, the Society of American Travel Writers. Since there's usually strength in numbers, do you recommend writers join these groups and others like IFWTWA, which is, we all know, the International Food, Wine, and Travel Writers Association? Because we all know what IFWTWA is.
Yeah, another good question. And the answer is 100% yes. And the reason for this is that there is a substantiation process to become a member. You can't just be my uncle, sister's brother's mother and say you're a travel writer. To join the Society of American Travel Writers, you have to produce to them the stories that you've written for them to accept you as a member. In some other societies around the world, and there are many, I might add, they have a minimum word limit of 20,000 words. Now that means, think about it, you're doing at least 500 words a week. And for you to become a member of those societies, you have to pass the pub test. In other words, you've got to be able to give them the stories that you've written for them to accept you as a member. So yes, absolutely. If you want the credibility of not just your name, it's important to have these associations behind you.
Excellent. Opinion piece. Should travel journalism be a regular college course? And if so, what should be included?
Wow. Okay, so let me just change that question ever so slightly.
Go ahead, please.
Communication is the most important thing that I know. In school, they really need to teach you that understanding English and being able to teach the rhythm and rhyme to any story is so important. The rhythm and the rhyme. You can sit there and speak about your trip, but to encapsulate the traveler, the reader, should I say, in your story, there is an art to it.
Yes.
There's an art to communication, full stop. I believe that it should definitely be part of a college course, being language, whether it's any language in the world, let's just say English for lack of a better argument, let's stick with English, yes, it's definitely important. AI is certainly going to help us, but it's important if you want to be unique to come up with your own words.
Thank you.
Is there anything we haven't asked you, Nick, that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it all, but I think the most important thing is that, as I said earlier, it's in our DNA to travel. We love traveling. We love meeting people. We are a social species. We'd like to get out there and meet people, experience other cultures. I think travel is here to stay. I think there are ways that we can tackle the environmental issues. We're certainly looking at modern technology to make planes electric, to make them more environmentally conscious. Cruise ships are turning to gas and hydrogen, electricity for that matter. So I think that so long as we can bear the environmental cost in the short term, and in the longer term find technologies that allow us to overcome the burden that it has on the environment, it is an important part of our DNA. I really think that we all should get out there and travel, not just for yourselves, but also to help the economy. And it's such a beautiful place, this world. If you have a conscious, you want to save it, you're only going to learn that if you go and experience it. So happy travels.
Excellent.
And finally, as a former travel editor, Nick, do you recommend that our viewers go out there and read about travel before they pick their places to go?
Oh, you got to do your research. You're spending a chunk of change to go to a particular destination. Don't take a travel agent's or your friend's advice. Read up about it. Listen to first-person experiences, because hopefully that trusted journalist is going to tell you the good, the bad, and heaven help us, the ugly.
Yes.
Well put. Our guest today has been Nick Whalen, founder of Trav Media, former travel editor, great Australian accent, and really knows the world of travel. Thank you so much for being our guest on Travel It's Radio.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Roger. It's been a pleasure to be here. I really have enjoyed my time, and I hope you'll invite me again.
Oh,
We
yes.
certainly will.
Yes. Thank you.
And
Nick.
our viewers need to know that 2024 was the 50th anniversary of the home run that broke Babe Ruth's record for Hank Aaron. This is your chance to share that excitement with my new biography, Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron, featuring a foreword by Dusty Baker. This 265-page hardcover explores Aaron's contributions as a home run hitter on and off the field, as an athlete, and as an advocate for civil rights. And by the way, Jimmy Carter just had a state funeral today. He was a very close friend of Hank Aaron. That's Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron. Get it today on Amazon.com. And that's it for this edition of Travel It's Radio. Now, this is Dan Schlossberg, along with my friend and producer, Roger Noriega, saying thank you for your time this time until next time, when our guest will be Laura McMurtry of Explore Scottsdale. Wishing all of our viewers a happy, healthy, and travel-full new year. Good night and stay safe.